Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to 50 by 50, the Harvard class of 1976, specifically whatever happened to the Harvard class of 1976. I'm Michael Conniff, your host, a member of that class, and I am very happy to be joined by my friend John Harnes. Welcome, John. How are you? Good to have
Thank you, Michael.
You know what's great about doing I was just going to say, what's great about doing a Harvard podcast is people are already complaining about it, which I love, because that means they're watching it, right? But John,
I can unsubscribe.
Yeah, well, you were present at the creation of this idea, and you have a bit of a bone to pick, so I'm going to let you pick it. Go ahead.
I was present at the creation of the Conniff 50, as we called it, and it was at a weekend at your house in East Hampton with Chris Taylor and John Dorfman, and I was not. I didn't make the cut. Dorf made the cut, Chris made the cut, and I didn't, and. So I'm glad I guess I'm off the wait list. I feel a little like Joe Flacco going to the Pro Bowl. It's like, I'm a competitor. I'll do my best. And honestly, I was, I'm feeling a little bit insecure here, being as kind of a last minute call in. But then I thought, well, he's doing Dorfman. I got to be able to beat that. And then I watched his podcast, and he's serious and sage and thoughtful, and I'm like, damn, now I'm really in trouble.
He's not that in real life, of course, as we know, but
yes.
John Dorfman has been rebranded.
I guess so. Well,
I would put it that way. But
I've known Dorf when he was served in a 6.5 ounce bottle for 10 cents. So it's not working for me.
I know you guys went to high school together. I wanted to explain myself, if I might. Guilty with an explanation. So the problem, I'm trying to get at least one of each, so to speak. Like, I just talked to Mary Maha. She's an architect. Paul Sappho. I just talked to, he's a futurist. Robert Kraft, he's a musician, so I want to sort of check all the boxes. The problem is was that you were in a box called lawyer. And as I've gotten to know you better, I realized that's actually not the box you're in. And as I got to know you better, I thought I could really see we have a lot to talk about. But particularly given your newer reincarnation as a historian, which we'll talk about. But what I wanted to say is that John Kiernan had to be my first lawyer because I went to high school with him and knew him so well. And I will have other lawyers, but the problem is we have so many lawyers in our class, and we have so many doctors in our class, and we have so many Wall Street people in our class that, I just want to try to find some of the outliers. But now that I've gotten
the only thing,
it's different.
No, the only thing I was going to say is I think I have a slightly different beaten path in my legal career. So to that extent, I have a different perspective.
And your Harvard career, I think that's true. No, we're going to get into that right now. But first, I want you to eat crow about Manchester United this year. You were really dissed us all year. We came in third in the Premier League. I think an apology is in order. What do you think?
Well, it was the Ruben Amorim effect.
That damn formation. Yes.
Okay. So it's amazing what a different manager can do.
Yes. John, I wanted, first of all, you've had a long legal career, which we'll hear about. And you're doing a really, really good podcast with your daughter called, and I shouldn't call it a podcast, a really good blog called History, Rinse and Repeat, in which you take something happening today and you bring it to bear on something that happened a long time ago, and they kind of inform each other in a very interesting way. I think it's really well written and well done. So kudos on that. But in terms of, Harvard, I mean, I don't know quite how to say this, but what interested me in a way was that Harvard was not an easy experience for you. It was kind of difficult, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I figured we were going to talk about this, and it's hard to talk about failure which clearly was my Harvard experience, without sounding morose or self-absorbed or self-pitying. So, with those guardrails,
Well,
you
wasn't
know,
failure? I'm gonna push back and be the devil's advocate and say maybe it wasn't failure. Tell us what you mean.
I got kicked out for a year, so that's that's pretty close.
But you
It
came
was.
back.
I
You
mean,
came back. Yeah.
it's. I mean, I think I'm probably going to be. I suspect I'm going to be unique among your 50. That I hated every minute I was at Harvard. It was the worst 4 years of my life. I'm deadly
Voice my
serious.
sound right.
I,
I can go now.
I was miserable,
Why?
and
Why
I,
though?
I think and then again, it's like you know, it's it was sort of a perfect storm of my character flaws and the 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 for lack of a better term the experience there. I arrived at Harvard very successful. Um, I'm not saying something that 99% of other Harvard graduates can't say, but I was first in my class at St. Mark's. I had the highest GPA for the 3 years. And I was a good athlete, and it's hard to believe, but going to Harvard was just I just it was something that I knew I was going to do from probably the time I was 12, just because of the schools that I went to, and nothing that I was special, but the schools that I went to, and if you hit the markers, you pretty much of a shoo-in. But for all that, I was, one of the things that kind of was interesting to me when my mother died, and she kept all my old report cards, and I'm reading the reports from my teachers, and I had the privilege of having a Latin and Greek teacher who was one of these incredible prep school guys who is just genius, was accepted at Harvard Law School, took a year at St. Mark's to make some money to pay for it, and he never left. And he had a PhD in classics from University of Chicago, and just real tough guy, real tough love kind of classic prep school teacher. And then I'm reading all these reports about me and kind of the insight and sort of the empathy and the understanding that I was just stunned to read, because I never experienced any of that while I was at the school. And basically, what he said was that I wasn't motivated. And, so I arrived at Harvard with no motivation
Well,
and
hang on a second. The
little
top
direction.
average and number one in your class and no motivation. I don't know how you could have done that, to be honest.
Well, the reports were all, I wish John would work a little harder. Every report. I wish John would work a little harder. I went
Yeah.
to my 50th reunion at St. Mark's, and I was stunned. Everybody was saying, Jesus, why didn't you just put in more effort? And I was kind of like, I kind of thought that I had, but I guess what I'm saying, Michael, what the teacher basically said is I really didn't have any concept of what I was going for. That I was just doing the work because it was required and it was assigned and I was doing it. And so, I arrive at Harvard with no motivation and very little direction. I mean, I had no direction. I had no idea. And those are like, Harvard is the worst place. It's the best place for motivated and focused people. Is the worst place for unmotivated and unfocused people.
Particularly
And
freshman year.
that was the problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's all on me. I found Harvard to be a miserable place. And I can give you two stories which people are sort of surprised when I tell them the story. I signed up for a Greek class teaching Herodotus. I go into class the first day. The professor looks at the class and he says, "Geez, this class is too big. How many undergrads?" So we all raise our hand. He says, "There's too many undergrads. I don't want to teach you." He's saying this outright. And he said, "I'm just going to tell you now, I'm going to set the pace so tough. you're not going to be able to keep up. So be warned if you stay. And I'm like, I guess I'm not reading Herodotus. Maybe earlier, if I were a freshman or a sophomore, maybe I would have said, "Oh, I'm up to the challenge." By the time I was a junior, I'm like, I'm not doing this. And the other story I'll tell is, one of the big things about being a classics major was that you had full professors as tutors. So in my junior year, my tutor, I was in a tutorial with Dave Stockman, and I can't remember who the girl's name was. She was in Kirkland House.
Reagan as the Ronald Reagan as the budget director.
No, this is Dave Stockman, not Bob Stockman, or is it Bob Stockman? Now I'm getting confused. He was in the poor set. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm a good guy. I mean, so I'm embarrassed that I'm confusing his name now. But we're in there, and the tutor is Shackleton Bailey, who was new to Harvard. The billed as the English language leading Latinist. And he is the world's authority on Cicero, which was my favorite author, which I wanted to study. So I get put in a tutorial, and I'm like George C. Scott, Shackleton Bailey, you magnificent bastard. I read your book. I'm like really excited. And guy comes in, takes off his watch, puts it on the desk, and he starts translate. And so one of us starts translating, and then he stops, and then he goes, next translate, he goes, stop. This was the entire semester. I don't think he gave us 3 sentences of instruction the entire semester. He was so pissed that he had to be there with us. And I'm like thinking halfway the semester, maybe we could cut a deal. I don't want to be here either. Maybe we can cut a deal. We can negotiate a grade, and we'll just call the whole semester off. And the joke is, I met someone later who taught Latin at Chapin, was my daughter's Latin teacher, and he had got a doctorate at Michigan, where Bailey went back, and apparently he was a beloved avuncular, just the darling of the classics department. So maybe he didn't like Harvard either. I don't know.
Well, listen. Do you have any good stories about Harvard?
Honestly, no one's ever asked me that question. But I will say,
I don't want to put you on the spot, John. But when
no, not at all, not at all. I will say, let me answer the question, Michael.
Bad things happen in Harvard, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the friendships. I mean, what I always say about my experience at Harvard is not the professors, because frankly, I can probably name on my thumbs the courses that I found really interesting at Harvard, and maybe that's just my experience, my failings, or whatever. I mean, James Q. Wilson's course was one on crime. I still think about that course to this day. It was just fascinating. I learned so much. But what I always say about Harvard is not so much the classes, but not that everybody at Harvard is smart, but that it's the one time in your life where you are surrounded by just so many talented, creative, and I think that's the big difference. You can get smart lawyers, you can get smart investment bankers, although they're much rarer, but you can get a lot, but creative, interesting. There's nothing like it, and you're never again going to be with such interesting people and a variety of such interesting people. So that's so I do have something good to say about Harvard.
We were in Eliot House. I remember. I think I think we were there I graduated in 77 actually. I think you were there in 77 if I'm not mistaken.
As did I. What I refer to as my second senior year.
Yeah, and by the way, I here's my little story of Al Heimert, our housemaster, who Jim Cramer, the famous Jim Cramer of the financial show on CNBC, was the editor of the Crimson, and he actually got his diploma he was directly in front of me. So and Heimert hated Cramer. He said something really dismissive. And they said, oh, and here comes Michael Conniff. He has an interesting career in fiction ahead of him. I had written an expose of Eliot House, which was not fiction. And, and that's what he was referring to. Ironically, I became a fiction writer. So who knew? Who can tell? So listen, John, the reason I say this, so you were unhappy at Harvard, but I think maybe you were unhappy anyway. Is that fair? And I really want to know what happened on that off year, and if that you came back and you got reaccepted, and or you got accepted, and what happened to make you leave or to get kicked out, and what happened to bring you back?
I got kicked out. I mean, you're going to laugh. The course that got me in trouble was expository writing. I didn't hand in all my papers. And I not only didn't hand in all my papers once, didn't hand in all my papers twice, which is kind of, and
Suicidal.
it's the only thing that kind of, you know, I it's all on me. But, I sometimes think this is such weird behavior, inexplicable behavior that maybe someone should have said, John, maybe there's something more serious than just the fact that you're lazy, which was kind of the attitude, and it's like, my year off, you have to work, So, I worked in a restaurant as a waiter and then I traveled some before I came back. I went to Lebanon, which was really interesting. And the waiter experience actually helped me later in life. But, but basically I was just waiting. It was just kind of a limbo to go back. And maybe I
You
should
wanted
have.
to go back. You wanted to go back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
I
I
mean,
tell
my
you about
one
it?
regret going,
I wish I had known you then, John. And you and I actually have a lot of overlap. We went to the same grade school at different times in New York, so we never met each other at St. David's. And then
I was gonna tell anybody who watches this that I left after the fourth grade and you took my spot.
I
You're the
took
new
your
and
spot,
improved John Harnes.
in the sports teams and everything. But I'm I wanted to say about Expos. I wish I had known you because I submitted an Expos paper. So remember, I'm going to grow up to be a writer. Okay, my father's a writer. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. I hand in my essay. I get an F on my first Expos paper, and, and I'm like, oh man, this is not going well. So here's
Yeah.
my first Harvard lesson. Goddamn right, I transferred out of there, and it turned out, John, there was a class of misfit toys of people who had not flunked, or who said like couldn't deal with their Expos, and it included Ned Lamont, the future governor of Connecticut, in that class.
I wish I'd known about it, Michael. I
Yeah,
wish I'd known
yeah.
about it. But
And
the joke
I read
the
that
joke
essay.
is I
I'm sorry, I was just going to say I read that essay that I had read. I'd kept it because it was too good not to keep, and I realized I got the F because I said this assignment is bullshit. The whole thing was like, this is so stupid. I can't believe we're doing it, and it gave me an F,
yeah
which I deserve.
yeah.
But anyway, you did you feel like you had to grow up in that year away? Did you feel like you did grow up? Were you a different? Like we've had a bunch of people who left. I left for a year. When you came back, was it easier?
No. No, it wasn't. And probably my one regret is I stayed in the classics department, which was a mistake because
Yeah.
I studied
I,
classics
I switched
purely.
myself from psych to
I'm
history.
sorry.
I switched, and it made a huge difference.
I classics department was full of people who wanted to be most in our day. Most people that were in classics wanted to go into academia, and I was just taking it because I thought it was interesting, and I think I had kind of the reputation of as a dilettante, which I probably deserved given my given my performance. Um, but what I did do is I finished my requirements junior year, and then senior year just took whatever I wanted to take. And so that was better year. But as you said, it was my second senior year classes, year 1977, and
Did you know?
so I took a number of interesting courses.
Did you know you were going to be a lawyer? What were you thinking as you graduated?
I figured I probably was going to be a lawyer. I mean, what probably nobody knows about me who went to Harvard with me is, they probably think my mother was, had tea at the Cosmopolitan Club, for lunch and whatnot. My mother was a lawyer. She graduated in 50. She applied to law school when she was 6 months pregnant with my
Wow.
brother. So she was accepted at Columbia and she was accepted at Fordham. And she couldn't go to Columbia because the schedule wouldn't allow her to raise my brother. So she goes to Fordham, which she had no regrets doing. And she graduates third in her class. I'm born a week. She takes the bar exam a week before I'm born. So she's 9 months pregnant when she takes the bar exam. She's third in her class. She can't get a job. And no one will hire her because she's a woman. And this is pre Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, this is a
Who
number
could
of
also
years
not,
before.
who also could not get a job. Same thing.
Yeah. And so uh, her father was a lawyer, so she started doing assigned cases, criminal cases, because that was the only way. She wanted to be a litigator. She got one offer at Mudge Rose, T&E. You'll never be a partner. You'll never see a courtroom. That was her only offer. She said no. She wanted to be a litigator. She started taking assigned cases. She started working for some well-known defense lawyers in Queens, because that was where my grandfather knew all the judges. And she was appointed to the U.S. Attorney's Office in 1959. As I say, I just looked for this podcast. I looked at Bader Ginsburg. That's when she graduated from law
So she's
school, and my
way ahead.
mom's in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Um, and it's so there's actually a newspaper article in Newsday about when she was appointed, because they didn't allow women in the Southern District, so that's why she went to the Eastern District.
Hmm.
And she told me when she was hired, she said at her interview, at the end of the interview, they said, any other questions? And she said, well, I just have one. I really want this job. Is there anything that I haven't done that I could do that would help me get this job? And the guy giving her the interview said, yes, you could change your sex. Um, so this is all a
Wow.
roundabout way of saying, law was in my family. And
So
I
you're like
sort
me. You're
of,
third generation.
yeah. And it's um, so I always knew I was going to be a lawyer, but I just kind of wanted to prolong the inevitability. So when I got out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Frankly, I was exhausted. And I just wanted to go home and figure out what I was going to do. So because I'd worked as a waiter when I was young, I got a job at Maxwell's Plum, where I worked there for a year, and without a doubt, it's the best job I ever had. Best year I ever had.
Why
It
was
was
it the best
incredible
year?
fun. And I was just, I have tons of stories, but it was a lot of fun. And then while I was still in
I
college, I
have
started
to
to
ask
do.
you this. I have to ask this. What did you like about being a waiter? Because you've mentioned it in two different parts of your life where you did it. What was it about that compared to what you had done before that you liked so much?
Well, number one, you're making money. You're making a
Yeah,
ton. I
that's a good
mean,
thing.
it took me several years as a lawyer to make as much as I was making as a waiter after tax.
Right.
And it was just it's easy. You show up, you give your days off, you show up for work, you do your job, you go home, and that's it. There are no responsibilities. No one's calling you. No one's anything. And plus, you're in. Maxwell's was a hot spot. And so, in the days when First Avenue was the sort of social
Yeah.
center
The
of New
playpen they
York,
used to call it. Yeah.
exactly. Working at Maxwell's, I was royalty not just I, but my peers. My coworkers, we were royalty in any bar we walked into because we were brothers.
Sure.
So I didn't have to pay for a drink, and so it was, and Max was just a fun place. I mean, it was a crazy restaurant, and it was just a fun place.
Before we get into the your law career, do you think? And I mentioned this because I think you and I have talked about this. Does would you ever say at any point along the road to this point that you were depressed, that it was
Oh,
depression?
absolutely, absolutely,
And
and
so, go ahead.
not depressed in the morose. What am I doing in life? The sort of depressed. lack of focus, lack of energy, or maybe it's, I always say, God, if Ritalin had been invented when I was a kid, I'd be,
Yeah. Would
who
have been
knows what
first
I
in
could
your
have done.
class, John, with the highest grade point average.
Yeah, well, but it's uh, it's one of the advantages of being a lawyer is you have deadlines and you just have to make them or you don't.
But
So,
before, I don't want to. I just bring this up because my sophomore year, I broke up with the woman who's now my wife, 35
mhm.
years later. But I just, and I had a lot of manic depression, as we called it then. Not, we didn't call it bipolar, but I had a lot of manic depression. My mother, and in my family, all over my family, right? So I had more or less a year of depression, and if what I would say to you is somebody who maybe suffered similarly, is that if you haven't had depression, it's really hard to describe what it's like, because it's and you tell me what you think, but for me it was a black hole my whole sophomore year that just got deeper, and a black hole where there's no way out. It's just down. And eventually I snapped out of it. I came out of it. Fortunately, it hasn't happened again, which is kind of amazing. But is that how you would describe it? Is that because I think a lot of what you're if a person who is depressed is going to find it hard to get in their Expos papers and to go to class and to do just normal things. Everything's hard. Do you think
Well,
that's
that's
what
the
it was?
joke. I mean, kind of what I was saying earlier, that you're there and if you don't go to this particular class or you don't hand in this paper, you're going to get tossed. And yet, for whatever reason, which is inexplicable to me looking back 50 years ago, I was incapable of doing it. And the joke is when I took Expos over the summer, it was like, why was this so difficult? And it's just, it was a piece of cake, and which it was, because I mean, you said you're a writer. I mean, I'm a lawyer, but I've been writing. Lawyers, you write your entire life, and that's what I've been doing.
But I guess I don't want to push too hard on this, but I'm just wondering whether unmedicated, right? Nobody was giving us anything for that back then, really. So unmedicated. I'm just going to speak for myself. Unmedicated depression. It was like I'm really lucky that I came out of it. I could easily not have. I could have easily, I felt suicidal a lot my sophomore year after taking a year off, and there were lots of reasons why I felt that way. But I think that if you're having depression, it kind of it dominates everything else. And in my family, combining it with drinking was really bad. It was like a really bad combination. But anyhow, I don't want to push too hard on it. But I think that because look, you went to the best schools in the world. You did better than anybody else. You were a terrific athlete. I know because we played together on the Elliott House team. It may have been beyond your control, in a way. That's what I would
You
suggest.
know, I'm not reluctant to talk about it. I'm reluctant to talk just because I'm worried that people are going to be looking at this and either be bored or think that it's someone's being self-indulgent or self-absorbed or whatever.
Ron,
But
here's the
I will
thing:
say,
as long as I'm not bored, you're okay because I don't care about anyone else.
but
As Trump said
I
about the American worker, like I don't care about them.
to answer your question,
No.
when I was a junior at Harvard and I had trouble getting a summer job, so my mom said, "Come work at the office. We'll find some stuff for you to do." And her partner, um, he was starting a trial the following Monday, and he said, "Listen, if you're thinking of being a lawyer, come with me to the trial. Help me. You'll carry the bag. You'll hand up exhibits, et cetera, et cetera." So I walked into the courtroom Monday. It was a securities fraud. It was actually broker fraud, which is probably the only one we ever did at the firm. But I walked in that courtroom, and it was just like, this is what I was just blown away. This is what I want to do the rest of my life. So,
Wow, that's great.
answer to your question, did I pull myself out of it? No. because, I said I had no direction and no motivation. So being a lawyer was the direction, and
Yeah.
I wanted badly enough that when I was applying to law school, I wanted to stay in New York. I didn't want to go away again. That I worried about going away again. That was the only kind of concession I made. Like, I don't want to be drifting. So I wanted to stay in New York. And I ended up going to Brooklyn Law School, which is wonderful because whenever my kids get depressed and think their life is miserable, I said, "You never went to Brooklyn Law School. You didn't. You didn't suffer that humiliation. So you got it easy, So, but that was an experience, and I don't mean that in a bad sense. It's completely different. And I don't want to say I hang out with any of them anymore, but it was my nickname, my first year of law school was Sven the Swede.
Was what? Was what? I'm sorry.
Sven the Swede.
Okay.
That was apparently what people in the peanut gallery dubbed me the first day I walked into law school. So it gives you an idea. It was a different experience from Harvard Law School.
But you were so, you've been at the top of the heap, so to speak, but now you're not. Brooklyn Law School is not the top of the heap, but you're motivated. You want it. Fair enough?
I'm sorry you broke up. Your question broke up, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say you're not at the top of the heap, but you're at Brooklyn Law School, but you're motivated. You really want it. You want to succeed.
I wasn't motivated to that extent. As I say, I had direction. I think the second big thing, and again, this is going to sound very saccharine and very whatever, is I met my wife. And that was just, that is, and I kind of joke, if I were religious, I would say God had a plan, but, I'm not. So it's just
Well,
serendipitous.
you,
It's
you
just
could say God,
serendipitous.
you could say God created woman, so there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
And
And,
your wife is from Denmark,
yeah,
and
she's from
definitely,
Denmark.
John, you're punching above your weight. Let's just leave it at that.
Absolutely.
But she's
Absolutely.
a lovely person, and so that made a big difference. That's also part of direction and motivation, isn't it?
That was the motivation because, you're no longer responsible for yourself. And, as soon as you start having children, you've got responsibilities and you can't fail. And so, if that had not happened, Dorfman always tells me I'd be, divorced and an alcoholic at 52, but if I hadn't met my wife. So, uh,
I would put it more like you'd be a waiter at Olive Garden.
but I would have been good. I would have been good.
A good way, you might have been happier. Um,
Yeah.
so that put the things together. But you said one of the things about you as a lawyer is the kind of a non-traditional path. So when you get out of law school, what did you apply to big firms? Did you say no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do more
I
like
did
what my
apply
mom
to big
did?
firms, but needless to say, I didn't get an offer. So I went to work for my mom's firm, and I had been essentially working there since law school. So
Mhm.
when I was admitted in '82, I was effectively a fifth year associate and I
Mhm.
knew I was not going to get the opportunity to do things. So really from the day I was admitted, I was arguing motions. I was, handling conferences with court. I was doing depositions. And, the beauty of being in the plaintiff's bar is you're not at a big firm, but you're litigating against big firms. So
Mm.
the the level of competition is just as high. In fact, it's higher because you work you're always going against somebody that's in the big leagues. Where if you work at a big firm, you very often you just have to show up, and the plaintiff's lawyer is going to fall over himself. Um, so I was getting a lot of experience, and that ultimately is what, in retrospect, I don't want to say I thought this through. I just wanted to get as much experience as I could,
Yeah.
develop whatever skills I could get. And as it turns out, I after then I went to a smaller firm of like 25 lawyers, which was very good, but another miserable place to work. And then I got a job at Skadden Arps, And the reason that I got the job at Skadden was because I had taken a deposition that was defended by my soon-to-be boss, and he had defended it, and he learned afterwards that I was a first-year associate, and apparently he was, according to my mother, he was flabbergasted that I was a first-year associate. So
Hmm.
I don't want to say that was my plan, but it worked out. So I got hired at Skadden Arps, and so that was kind of my reputational rehabilitation that I was back, you know,
Yeah, because Skadden Arps is one of the big name law firms in
yeah, I
New
mean,
York and worldwide.
even if
How
even if
long
I'm
were you
still
there,
Joe
John?
Flacco, at least I'm in the I'm in the show.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 5 years.
Okay. And happy, unhappy?
What I always say about Skadden is the abuse was impersonal rather than personal. Um, you know, it's a strange place to work as a litigator because the driving engine of that firm is M&A, and the litigation department is at least in the New York department was very almost defensive because they really weren't drivers themselves, and the cliche is they're a service department or whatever, but the sense
Hmm.
was always, God, we can't screw it up. I mean, even at the partner level, they were like, we can't screw it up. And what I always say to my daughter now, because my younger daughter is in investment banking and she's working insane hours, and I always say to her, it's not the necessary work that kills you, it's the unnecessary work. And when you're in a big bureaucracy, there's just so much unnecessary work, and so
Yeah.
I had a good experience at Skadden. I tried 4 cases when I was there. I don't think there's any. I guarantee you, there's no associate, at least in my era, that could come close to that. But I had a boss who was, they're not big cases, but
They
they
don't
were
get to
like,
try, you don't get to try cases normally. Is that what you mean?
yeah, nobody. I mean, I don't think a lot of the partners could make that claim.
Huh.
And one was a construction case that was brought in by another associate. So my boss had helped him try the case. One was a small commodities fraud,
Hmm.
um, and I tried that. One was a will contest, which was like $5 million. It was not that small a case. So that we did pro bono, but I got to try that case. Um, but the paradox of being at Skadden is the way to success is being the number 5 guy on a deal and working your way up. Whereas trying cases, because I wasn't working with anybody, I wasn't making any relationships. My boss, I had a boss. This was the guy that I had met at the deposition. He would, if he had some assignment that needed to be done and needed someone to go to court, he'd call me. So it could be bankruptcy court, it could be surrogates court, it could be federal court, it could be state court, it could be anything,
But
And
that's
so,
probably good, right? You get to try it.
oh,
You
it's
get to
good.
do
It's
everything.
good for me, absolutely. And the 2 things I always say about that I learned at Skadden: A, no deadline is too tough. You got insanely unreasonable deadlines, and you just shock yourself that you can meet them. And the other thing was that I always tell my kids is that at some point you learn that when you've got a very tight deadline, you just have to say, this is the product I have. Can't get any, it's got to be done. I get an assignment 11 o'clock at night, has to be ready at 8 in the morning. I got 7 hours, 9 hours to do it at, 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. Doesn't matter where you are. That's what you got, and that's what you're putting out, and that's it. And you got to live with it. And so
Mm.
um,
That's why I
that
didn't
was what I
apply.
learned at SCAD.
So John, it sounds like you were successful there. You got to try more cases than the normal associate, but you also probably sensed it wasn't going to be a lifetime fit. You weren't going to make partners. So what was your escape plan from the big time law firm?
Plan and John Harnes are like, it's
They
like an
don't go.
oxymoron. They don't fit in the same sentence.
What was the accident that happened that got you out of there?
Yeah, I always joke with my wife that I would like to say I knew I was going to marry her the first night I met her, but I don't think that far ahead. So
He might have said, so you might say you didn't have a plan. Others might say you didn't have a clue.
yeah, I think both are true. Um, it's kind of strange. You're. I knew I wasn't going to make partner. I was hired as a lateral, and I knew that from day one.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I continued to work. And it's funny when you say you're happy. I don't know how you put it. It's just you just do it. And I know it's like going to boarding school. You happy at boarding school? Nobody's happy at boarding school, but you do it, and
Well,
and you learn
I
from
have
it.
bad news for you. I was actually happy at boarding school, so
Were you
sorry.
really?
Oh yeah, I was absolutely. I
um,
peaked. I peaked there.
so it's funny. The one thing that I learned, um, and again, this goes to my career path. Um, I probably in another era could have stayed there the rest of my career as quote unquote senior counsel.
Right.
Because when you say I was successful, you know, I don't know how great an associate I was. There's certain tasks that associates do that are not my strength. The kind of being efficient and whatever. Um, but you know, and this kind of shows you this sort of I'm trying to think of the word, the random nature of law firms. My fourth year, they had a shakeup in the litigation department in New York. When I started, there was a head of litigation, and there were two teams. So there was they were the Schwartz team. It was a lawyer named Tom Schwartz, and my boss was Mike Mitchell. It was the Mike Mitchell team, and there were 40 lawyers on each team.
Yeah.
Um, when the head of litigation got kicked upstairs, Tom Schwartz was appointed head of litigation. Within 2 years, everybody on the Mitchell team was gone. So it was,
You're on the
including
wrong
Mitchell,
team. Wrong team.
including Mitchell,
Yeah.
including Mitchell,
Yeah.
and not just the associates, the partners, and so I'm not suggesting this is some kind of injustice or bad luck or whatever, but it was like when Mike Mitchell was not appointed head of litigation, I knew, you know, my days are numbered because I saw
I was
people
best. Yeah.
getting picked off, and I think I lasted longer than most, but but I had to go to an outplacement thing, and it was one of the two great pieces of advice someone gave me. And I said, I don't know what I'm looking for. And I actually had an offer at Rogers and Wells, which was, another big firm. And I could have gone there.
How
And
old were you at this point, John? How old were you?
I went about 37,
37.
36,
Okay.
36, 37.
Well,
And uh, any event, I was talking to this outplacement person, and I'm like, what should I do? Big firm, and I'm like, well, what do you think? Maybe in house, I'd have them. I'm having kids, that'd be a more reasonable schedule. And she looks at me and she goes, in house. She said, you can't even tolerate a law firm bureaucracy. If you went to work for a corporation, you'd hang yourself. So it was like the first time I thought, maybe my part of my problems is, what I say to my kids is the unnecessary work. And so I made the decision to go back to my mom's firm with the hope that I would be able to build it into something,
mhm.
and kind of chart my own path. That didn't work.
Was she
Her
still there, John?
partner, she was still there, but her partner was the principal of the firm, and he is, like a lot of small law firms, people who found a firm and run it their entire lives. They're kind of mini dictatorships, and he was not. I'm sorry, he was not. He was happy to have me as an associate, but he was not ready to accept me as a peer. So after a couple of somewhat strife-filled years, I made the decision to go out on my own with one other person, a guy that I was working with, and we went out on our own. And that's kind of my second act, which was again unconventional. But one of the reasons we did it was because we recognized everybody kind of learned about remote work during COVID, we back in 1999, we recognized that computers would allow us to, have as flexible hours as we wanted, and we could work from anywhere. So, we had an office in New York. When the kids were in school, we went to the office every day. And then as soon as summer vacation started, he had a house in Oregon. He went to Hood River,
I'm
Oregon for the
having some
summer.
technical
I came
difficulties,
up to
but I
Pauling in
think
Dutchess
it
County for the
came
summer,
out
and
okay
we worked from there. And this is like,
in the post
25,
processing.
26 years ago.
But
And it was kind of nobody did it, but, and it really enabled to give a work life balance, because I was home for dinner every night.
mhm.
And then the kids would go to bed, and then I just go back to work from home. And, I could do that. And we did that for the next 20 years.
And how I want to make sure we have time to talk about your next act, but how you were a litigator and you would get into situations where you could share in the spoils of a successful litigation, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my practice
Yeah.
mostly until the end was in Delaware, which is the most marvelous place to practice in the world, because the law is interesting. The judges are very smart. They all take it seriously. They also take the lawyers seriously. And because there are only 5 judges, if you practice there routinely, they get to know you. And so, there is a tremendous bias in the courts, deservedly so. I'm not whitewashing the plaintiff's bar, but there is a serious bias against plaintiffs' lawyers, particularly in the federal courts. And there's a certain bias in the Delaware courts, but because they're dealing with them on a daily basis, they can sort of decide who's um, who is worth hearing and who isn't, for lack of a more articulate way to express myself.
Are you are you completely are you completely retired now, John, from law?
No, I'm still doing a couple of cases that I work with other people. I mean, I don't have an office anymore. People call me up to help them, and so, I can do, draft briefs, do arguments, things like that. But, it's the kind of litigation. Um, I don't think I'd be capable of doing it anymore. I mean, just what I always say to people, um, you're going to depose, in a freeze out merger case in Delaware, you're going to depose some finance professor at Wharton. Um, and it's like taking a final exam, except
Mm,
except the exam isn't written, it's oral. And
right.
then the next except is you don't get to say the answers. You got to try and make somebody else say the answers that you want him
Like
to
it's
say.
like Jeopardy. It's like Jeopardy.
Yeah, and this guy knows the subject matter a lot better than you do.
All right.
And it takes it takes and it really takes a lot of focus, that when you reach a
Hmm.
certain age, you just, you're not, I mean, I'm capable of it in short bursts, but not
Yeah.
for an extended, like a serious trial would be like 3 months, between pretrial preps, trial, post-trial briefing. It would be nonstop for 3 months. And there's no
It's a
way at
lot
my
of
age
work.
I could even come close to doing that.
At your age, don't give me that. Listen, we have a few minutes left. I want to talk about history, rinse and repeat. And you're doing it with one of your daughters. You have
Yes, my older
two,
daughter,
and what is her name? Is that Annalise?
Annametta. Annametta.
And so, first of all, tell us about it, and then tell us what it's like working with your daughter.
Um, well, I've always, as I was saying earlier, I effectively have written for a living my entire life, just different things. And I started thinking about writing about politics and whatnot. And I'm like, well, what do I have to offer that 3 million people don't have? And sometimes I'm surprised. I had two things published in the Sun, which I wrote. And one was about an article where some two kids said that the real baseball fans in New York were Yankee fans, not Met fans. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? The world has come to this, that Yankee
Yeah.
fans are the real baseball fans? I'm sorry. So that's not really political commentary, but
I am a Yankee fan, just for the record. But
okay.
keep going.
But I mean, anybody who grew up a Mets fan has had all the heartbreak and agony of being a Mets fan. To be accused of not being a real baseball fan is just like laughable.
Ridiculous.
But
Yeah.
we were talking about writing, and the premise started when Joe Biden went to Saudi Arabia, and it was the fist bump. I don't remember the fist bump. And I'm sitting there at dinner with my daughter, and I said, I'm really surprised no one has written about, and I can't remember the British ambassador's name, but there was one of the best books I've ever read called The Immobile Empire, which was about the first trade expedition of Great Britain to China in the 18th century. And it's one of those books, and I was trying to think about it for this podcast. So this is not all spontaneous. I have thought about a little bit about what I was going to say, but it's like the book 1919, where you read 1919 and you know everything, but you're sort of stunned at how the roots of so much of what is happening today started at Versailles. And as soon as someone makes that connection, you go, Jesus, of course. But you don't make the connection yourself. So this was about this original ambassador's trip to China. This is a long-winded story for a very slim punchline, but the substance of the embassy became completely subsumed by the issue of how the British ambassador would greet the emperor. And the emperor was insisting that the British ambassador kowtow, and the British ambassador said, I don't even kowtow to my own queen. I'm not doing it. And so the entire negotiations centered around the greeting. And so I said to my daughter, I said, I can't believe nobody's writing about this. I mean, it's not that obscure a story.
Yeah.
So she said, well, why don't you do it? So I said, all right, I'll do it. And then she kind of came up with the idea of History, Rinse, Repeat, which was a way of commenting about current politics by reaching back to history. And, the second story we wrote was actually our most popular. And it was about, during COVID, and California had just passed the statute about, it was malpractice to recommend treatments that weren't consensus medicine. And so, I wrote about Joseph Lister, who's probably, arguably the greatest discovery, discovered sepsis and, the sterilization and operations and whatnot, probably saved more lives than anything. And his original discovery was not consensus. It was reviled by the authorities. It was rejected as it was nonsense. And so, if Gavin Newsom had been, if Joseph Lister had been practicing California, his discovery would never have been, it would have been buried in the world. So, and we just started from there, and we write about all sorts of things. Sometimes it's something that sometimes it's a current event that we try and see. Can we find a parallel? Sometimes it's a parallel that we immediately see when it's a current event. Sometimes about things, some of the plus things is I learn things that I didn't know anything about, like Anthony Comstock. I mean, I was reading an article on another thing, and I see about the New York Society for the Prevention of Vice. I'm like, what the hell is that? You just read it and you say, I got to know more about it,
Yeah.
And,
cool.
So we all know about the Comstock laws, but we don't,
Yeah.
not that many people. I mean, I consider myself pretty well read. It's not as well read as John Dorfman,
right.
but,
John,
I consider myself pretty well read. And, I knew about the Comstock laws, but I knew nothing about Comstock. And so you learn something when you do this. So it's kind of fun.
John, what about working with your daughter? I just got we're having a little technical issue here, but what about working with your daughter?
Yeah. Oh, you know why? Because I'm on my Wi-Fi rather than my. Sorry about that. I just realized I'm on my laptop, so I'm on my Wi-Fi. It's been fun working with my daughter. It's
Yeah, your Wi-Fi is a little iffy, but we'll deal with it. So, last question: what's it like working with your daughter?
hmm,
Can you hear me, John?
yeah. I'm. You
Yeah,
would
don't.
ask me about working with my daughter. I mean, one of the things that amazes me, and tell me if you lose me, is that working with my daughter, I'm like, where did this creativity come from? You know, it was,
Well, your
it's like it
wife.
didn't come from me. I have no create, and it just, she has such fun topics, and I'll bore you with one more story. But we were doing my son was applying to college, and I was helping him write his essays, and I show him to my daughter, and she goes, "Oh Christ, these are terrible," um, and she comes back, and it's like, who is this kid? Who is this is not my son that she's made him so, interesting and, it just has been able to
Right.
put so much life into this essay. And I was embarrassed that, she was so much better at this than I am. I mean, and it's, uh, you know,
Well, that's
and
what I call that
notwithstanding
good.
the fact that she went to Harvard.
Yeah, I call that good parenting. John, we're out of time. Super interesting. Thanks for being so open about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Really appreciate that. I know it's not easy. And we look forward to having you out here on our next semi-annual or biannual visit out here. So thanks for doing this, and see you at the reunion.
Absolutely. Bye bye.
Take care. All right.